We were aware from interviewing the climbers that there were a lot of cameras on the mountain in 2008 for the expedition, but when things started to go wrong, they weren't filming anything. A lot of the film takes place on the descent on the 1st of August 2008. So how do we represent that material without either photographs or video? Reconstructions seem to be the best way of doing this. Initially, we thought maybe we could do these in a studio environment because we could control it. We build a wall of ice and rock and control the lighting, use green screen techniques. But there's probably no substitute for being actually in an environment with snow and ice. It was decided to do a small test of how this would work. So I wrote up a scene which was Wilco down climbing because it involved a single climber. We got in contact with the mountain safety guy, Brian Hall, who primarily works within the film industry. We isolated several areas in Europe that we could work in.
We'd been made aware of the Eiger being a primary location. There's a very good reason for that. First of all, there's a funicular railway which actually goes through the mountain. This means you can get access to a very high point relatively quickly. 11,900 feet, and you literally open the door and you're on the top of the mountains.
Where we were going to be filming was quite high, and it could also be very, very cold. So a lot of it was to see how the cameras would work in those conditions, and more importantly, how a crew would work in these conditions. So in April 2010, a small group of us headed from Dublin to Grindelwald.
We flew to Zurich and we were going to get the train to Grindelwald, which is the village at the bottom of our filming location on the north face of the Eiger. This meant getting 3 trains.
We're just arriving on the train.
What's it looking like upstairs?
You got everything on you?
It's busy. Strong on Manchester. That's the X, right?
There were only 7 of us with pretty much a full complement of film equipment, which was, 10, 15 flight cases.
Quite a lot for a compact flight kit.
Our own carriage of gear.
It was just a mission in itself, just making the trains, but we did it. The morning after we arrived, we got our train passes to go up, which is very exciting, through this funicular railway. At the base of the mountain, the village Grindelwald is about 3,000 feet above sea level. The first train would take us to Kleinenscheide, which is at about 6,000 feet.
North face of the Eiger.
Red 1 on the side of a mountain. Altitude is 8,000 foot. Camera booted up, no problem. Batteries protected with a little bit of heat patches. So I'll try and keep the baby warm and do a couple of test shots now. Cheers.
Here we are at the edge of the Eiger. K2 reenactment starting to do tests. Should be interesting.
This area is great. Holding up, do you think? We'll see now. It looks all right, actually.
That means I'm hanging off a rope. Yeah.
By the time you get to the very top of the mountain, it's 11,900 feet. Most of us could really feel the altitude. You were breathless. This was going to be a challenging place to film. It was very windy and there was a lot of spin drift coming off the peaks of the mountains, and it was very cold. With wind chill, it was easily minus 25. Nick had this scene where Wilco was down climbing.
Paul Moores was our mountain guide, and he stood in as the actor for us.
Tarpaulin full of snow.
Yeah.
And then you get hold of a shiny.
Such a big avalanche. Like we were talking about chunks of ice the size of houses rolling across.
So Nick chose a kind of location where there's foreground rocks dropping off into a very steep drop of about 1,000 feet. There was a little ledge where we could spread out a green screen underneath where Paul was going to down climb.
As impressive as the Alps are, they don't look like the Karakoram region where K2 is in Pakistan. And I knew that I would have to do something about that. So when we were going to be shooting on the mountain, I would replace the backgrounds with either photographs or film footage, which I was hoping to get around K2 later on.
There were various things to consider. These scenes happened at particular times of day, and Nick was very determined to make this look as accurate and as real as possible. So we had to consider different slopes and locations, time of day where the sun was going to fall.
Yeah. So, Paul, so you're putting the crampon in, there's teething on the edge, and it slips out. So I think what's good is your left leg up higher, right leg down, and you're transferring your weight from the left hand to the right hand side.
We cut the sequence, From that, we isolated the shots that were going to be visual effect shots. They were very straightforward. They weren't particularly difficult visual effect shots. They were very simply replacement of backgrounds. What was important to me was that it should look absolutely as authentic as possible, so that when you were looking at these climbers on the mountain, that you really felt like you were there. This was a test for us to find out how we would shoot these for real, because we knew that when we were going to go with reconstructions, it was going to be 3 weeks, and we needed to know what the crew would expect. So for us, it was a hugely beneficial experience.
Over the 3-day test shoot, we had an opportunity to scout all the possible locations, which was invaluable. In fact, it would have been impossible to engage on the full shoot with a full complement of crew without knowing where we could operate and what we could expect.
The writer, Mark Monroe, and myself decided very early on that this film would probably work best as an immersive experience, putting you in the boots of the climbers. And the test in 2010 proved that this was going to be possible.
You can understand how I was, you know, because it was the only way. I had to go down because I need more oxygen and of course I need water. I was so thirsty, you know, and I knew I'm getting crazy in a few hours, because when you don't have water at that altitude for such a long time, you won't survive it. So I had to go down, down, down. And then finally, you know, the terrain was too steep, because on K2 you can't find an easy route. So the only thing I could do was go climbing up again. Of course I was exhausted, but there was no other way, so I had to do it. So 2, 3, 4 steps. I was bending over my Isaacs, and then, you know, I was falling asleep because I was so exhausted. And then I woke up again after, oh shit, I have to go up. So I climbed again. I think it took maybe 2 hours or something. I looked up and then I saw that Marco and Gerard were also with those Korean guys. But I couldn't reach them because I was too exhausted. And I was shouting, but they didn't answer me. Maybe I didn't shout loud enough or whatever, I don't know. I was asking, listen guys, where do I have to go? To the left or to the right? I can't go down. Maybe you can see from there where I have to go. But they didn't answer, and finally I just went to the right, through under the seracs.